friends. I got some work to do today, and you get to come along with me. So before I get started with my day, I have 9 gallons of tomatoes I grew that I need to cook down into pasta sauce. Tomato sauce, tomato juice, whatever. I'm gonna try for pasta sauce because we're completely out, but tomato juice is definitely easier and is fine for a chili starter. So I'm just inviting you along for the process. I haven't even gotten started with my day. Still gotta go get ready, but I'm gonna wash these, get as many of them in the pot as I can. This is the biggest pot I have. My mom gave it to me, my grandma gave it to her. And in case you're wondering, yes, I do wash my tomatoes after. It prevents me from getting ice. See, no ice. And sometimes the skins just fall off when you wash them too, which means less pulp to run through my sieve. Sorry I didn't introduce myself. I'm Angela. I'm a Mama and Grammie in Northern Kentucky. I'm an urban farmer. I own an online business. I wear many hats. And right now, we're gonna water bath can some great tomato products, hopefully. And I always forget to say this, but I'm gonna say it early. Please subscribe, like, share, comment, do all of those things. That really helps me, and it doesn't cost you anything. If I highlight any products in this video, they'll be in the description. I am an Amazon associate. I do earn money as an Amazon associate for any qualified purchases, but I only put things in there that I personally use or would like to use. So you can go to my link in my profile, go copy and paste the link from below, and I'll be back after I get these washed. I thought, you know what? I could talk about some of these different kinds of tomatoes as I wash them. Got some skins coming off. This is actually called a white tomato. I get the seed from Baker Creek. I can't remember the full name of it, but it is called a white tomato. For a San Marzano that I grew for the first time this year. You can see some of these white tomatoes get pretty big. I will not grow this again. I will have to look up the brand. But it was basically supposed to be like a copper colored tomato, but it did not tell me that it would stay green on top, and there's still some green in the middle. I do think it said there would be some green still inside. Got some Amish paste here. Yeah, that's gotta be a pasting tomato because the skin is coming right off. Do like to get, that's an Amish paste. That's a beautiful tomato. So what happened was I planted everything, got everything out early, actually, because we had such an early spring last year. And that was 2024, just for reference. Everything was in the ground by mid to late May. By June, we were in drought. I'm in the Northern Kentucky area, just south of Cincinnati, Ohio. Normally, we do not have drought conditions until late July, early August. We will have humidity in the air every morning, typically. This was an unusual year, but the plants were still growing, and in super hot, dry conditions, they were not setting blooms. No blooms, no blossoms, no fruit. Had plenty of bees this year, but they just had to content themselves with my flowers. July and August hit, and we still are dry. Not as hot as it was in June, but dry. These are one of my favorites. These were a blue tomato. Again, bad year, didn't get very big. There's another one. Just kind of blue on the top. With the drought, we also had no humidity. That is insane. There were literally only 2 mornings that I went out and I thought, it's gonna be a terribly hot, humid day. It is not uncommon in this area with the Ohio River so nearby to have 85 to 95% humidity. Not uncommon at all. I never actually checked the percentages on a daily basis. Typically, I have to get all of my work done first thing in the morning before 10 a.m. or it's too hot and I'm actually getting dehydrated because the humidity is pulling all of the water out of my body. I'm just sweating like crazy. Literally only 2 mornings I could think of that my glasses were fogging up. It was hot. As soon as I stepped outside, I had sweat. So not the case this year at all. That greatly hinders your harvest. But it all kind of turned around by late August, September. And I would say 90% of the tomatoes I got this year were from that time period. Because they were coming in little bits and pieces, I just threw them in the freezer. There was never any all at one time enough to make tomato sauce, and I did not want to buy any from the farmer this year. I had 80-something plants outside, and just for a little context, and I'll take you outside later when the weather gets better, there's another good Amish paste. I have no luck growing Romas, so I switched to Amish paste this year. That's what I'm going to do from now on. For some reason, I cannot grow Romas. I just think the seeds have been bred out of the same ones for so long, they just don't grow for me. You have to have picture perfect conditions, and I don't. So I put wood chips down, and I am only on, I think we have I don't even think we have 1/10 of an acre, but almost my entire yard is planted with either pollinating things, fruit trees, fruit bushes. There's not a lot of decorative that I do. I have one rose bush that was here when we moved in almost 10 years. It'll be 10 years ago this year. I've put everything in, and most of the ground is covered, and I expand every year. Most of the ground is covered with something. Now, these were a small tomato. I don't remember what they were called, but they did okay. I got all but 4 in there. So I'll hold this up so you can see. All but 4 bags. I will add a little bit of water down in the pot. I don't worry about adding too much water because they'll get juicy pretty quick. I had about that much in there. Cup and a half. Okay, I'll get this started. I am gonna turn it down to medium because I need to go get ready for my work day. And so a little bit more of the backstory. I started an online business, which you can go in my channel and see other playlists about that stuff. Totally ignored everything July, August, September. Not totally, but was not as hands-on as I normally am. And it was a good thing because it didn't do very well. And 2023, I took a sabbatical completely, other than the perennial things that come back like rhubarb, berries, that kind of thing, because I'd had knee replacements and I just needed a year off. 2024, during the drought, I had to water the flowers that I had for pollination next to the tomatoes. But I mentioned wood chips. I'm kind of going all over the place. Those wood chips trap moisture. Well, it wasn't enough moisture for the shallow-rooted calendula, marigolds. Marigolds ended up, once they get going, they're okay. Zinnias. When they're babies, they need lots of water. I ended up giving that fungal growth to the tomato plants, and I really didn't think I was going to get anything. Had to stop watering everything except the occasional flower watering. I had some overcrowding as I pulled things out, just kind of everything got a little more air. I ended up, so I said I had 9 here. I think I've already cooked down 3 or 4 because I made some tomato soup and canned it. So that's 12 to 13 gallons of tomatoes, plus the few that we ate. I mean, we probably ate a gallon, maybe a gallon and a half fresh during the summer. For some reason, we weren't really eating BLTs like we normally do. That's the gist. And I'll get those going. I'll go get ready, and I'll check back later when they're ready to put through the sieve. One more quick thing. Jimmy Carter, our former president, just passed away, and his funeral was recent, and my husband was telling me about his grandson speaking, talking about how they had Depression-era mindset because they still had a little place next to their kitchen sink where they washed out their plastic bags and reused them. And I think they were also talking about how he was environmentally minded. But my husband made it sound like everybody kind of thought it was funny that they saved their plastic bags for reuse. And my only thought was, yeah, what's your point? I learned this little trick from the cheapskate lady probably 20 plus years ago. You can reuse your bags if you buy the freezer bags, and I never reuse them if they've had raw meat. If it's been cooked meat and they're not super greasy and they're washable, how do I wash them? I get 3, 4, 5, sometimes 10 uses out of a bag. Why just throw them away? If you become an urban farmer, gardener, farmer, you know you have to preserve things, you have to take care of the land, you become much more environmentally conscious. And really, all of this trendy stuff is just getting back to the way our grandparents lived. They wouldn't have even had plastic bags. So they definitely would have reused their containers over and over and over again. So should we. Just my 2 cents. Well, hello again. You can clearly see that I'm still not ready. I have a little confession to make. It's been a couple of days since I cooked these down, and I just put the whole pot in an extra refrigerator that we have because quite frankly, I was busy and I ran out of time. And that's one of the great things about cooking down tomatoes is they're very forgiving. So I'm going to bring you in closer and show you what I'm going to do with them. Okay, so the best way I have found to do this, I'm sure there's lots of ways you can do it, but is to have this, I don't know, it's a sieve, right? It has a handle. It has this pestle, I think is what it's called. But here's the thing. I grew up with my mom having one of these, and it must have been much taller, or this base was wider. I guess it had to have been taller because she could put it over a standard pot or bowl. My sister picked this one up for me from Tractor Supply Company a few years ago, and I'm very grateful for it. It's the only kind you can really find now, unless you find, I know people who've found these as antiques in thrift stores, estate sales, etc. If anybody's ever on the eye for one of those, I would love to have it because I have to use this little bowl, and I'm not dissing Tractor Supply. They're one of my favorite stores, but I just have this one little bowl that I can use, and here's why I'm telling you all of this. The deeper the bowl you can get, the less splatter you have from up here. What I really need is a bowl that is like this, and I don't have one of those. A bowl or a container that you can put this over. And here's the flaw in the design is really this needs to be higher and rest like up here. So if anybody knows how to create one of those, that would be awesome. Because take it from me, I had to put on my apron because this will splatter from here to here, all the way around. Because you'll see these are just going to fall apart. And there's really not going to be a lot of stirring that I have to do. But you'll see the juice starts to drain in there. And because of my limitations with this, I have to repeatedly dump the juice that I collect in another pot. This is my largest pot outside of the one I cooked them down on. Eventually, my juice needs to get back in here. So it's kind of like I have to dirty an extra pot in order to put eventually all of my juice back in here. I'm actually probably going to end up having to dirty 2 pots that will hold enough to get it back in my big, big stock pot. So you can see that's already draining. I'll show you real quick. Got the handle on the wrong side. You just go around and you take this, and I am trying to go slow so I don't splatter everywhere. And all you're doing is separating the juice from the pulp and the peel. And a lot of people peel their potatoes or their tomatoes first. I'm sorry, I've got too much to do to mess with that when I can just cook it down. I grow everything organically. I'm not worried about the peel. You saw I did very little washing even. So what we'll collect on the outside here, this is your thickening, your paste, your pulpy without seeds. Pulpy, I don't know, whatever you want to call it. And as you put in more juice, that will come off of there, and eventually I'll just have to scrape it into the last of the juice. But I'm just gonna kind of fill this up, let it go. You can already see my bowl is gonna be full in no time at all. I need to go finish getting ready. I'm actually gonna have to, because here's what I have to do. I have to lift this up. I have to make sure I'm not dripping over everything. And I have to go like this, just to avoid a mess. Back over, because this can hold way more than this can. And there we go. And it just keeps going and going. This is gonna take me a while, so I'm gonna go finish getting ready, fill this up, let it drain on its own for a little bit, finish getting ready, and I'll be back with you later. Okay, I haven't finished yet. But I wanted you to see, I did get this pot emptied. I'm going to have to go wash it out because I already have this pot. You can see how big this pot is. I'm not good with knowing how many quarts of things. So I have this pot, and then this one is probably going to be full by the time I'm done too. Now this one has more of the pulp in it because I'm getting down to the bottom. So I want to make sure all of that is blended together. So I got to get this big pot washed out, and then I will dump these 2 in there and whatever is left in this, and I will start cooking it down, and I'll bring you back in when it starts to cook down a little bit. Now I got this going. This will take a long time to cook down. I'm gonna let it cook down an hour or so and then think about, do I just want some tomato juice? Do I want to do tomato sauce? I really want to make some pasta sauce. You know, you could always can tomato sauce and then just add your seasonings to it whenever you open it for pizza sauce or pasta sauce. I know people online, they do separate pasta sauce, pizza sauce canning. I just do the same. We don't like a lot of sauce on our pizza anyway, so I just kind of spread the pasta sauce thin. But I got a little cleanup to do here. This is why I say it splatters. You do not put a lid on it because you want the evaporation. We'll be back in a little while, an hour or so, and we'll check it, and I'll finally decide if I'm going to add seasonings for pasta sauce or if I'm just going to cook it down for a tomato sauce, or if I want to can it right then as tomato juice. You can see how much this has cooked down. Here was our starting level, and it's cooked down this much, but it's still not enough. And I have decided to go ahead and do pasta sauce. So I'm going to start adding seasonings, and this is probably not going to be enough. I feel like I never get enough, and I always have to add more. That was garlic. Going to do some homegrown basil. I have more in another room if I need to go get it. I just kind of add what I want, let it cook for a little bit, taste test it. This is oregano, same thing, home dried. This is parsley. One of my only issues with using fresh or my homegrown, not fresh, but my homegrown dehydrated, is that I still have stems. So anybody who eats my pasta sauce or anything that I use my, particularly parsley or thyme is always really bad too. I always tell them, if you get a stem, it's just a stem. Now I need to get my salt in there as well. Follow USDA recommendations for canning pasta sauce. I've done this a long time, so I know more by sight what I need. But get a recipe either in the Ball book, USDA's site. I'm not going to tell anybody to go against any USDA protocol. And I do add rosemary, but just a smidge, because I've read that canning with rosemary can make things bitter. But man, I do like the flavor. That's probably too much. Okay, gonna let this continue to simmer. It probably needs to go down maybe half as much again, and then we can start canning. You can see it's starting to thicken up. Just need it thicker. Okay, so I'm finally back, and I'm trying to refresh my memory on how long I need to water bath this pasta sauce. That's what we finally made. And I'll bring you in close to show you what it looks like, how you know when it's ready. And okay, so it will be 40 minutes for quarts, 35 minutes for pints, and I think I'm gonna do a combination of both. I always forget to set out my lemon juice. It really needs to be more room temperature a few times. You can learn from my mistakes. A few times in the past, I put the cold lemon juice in the bottom of the jar first, and then put the hot pasta sauce, tomato sauce, whatever on top, and then I had jars breaking in the bottom of the pot. Surprise, surprise, right? Okay, one more thing nobody ever told me I had to figure out on my own, and I'll show you. Now, I tend to be a leaper. I'm not real good at doing lots of research. I just like dive in and want to do it. I'm just a doer. So what happened, and I'll bring you in and show you, I had jars breaking, and my mom, who never taught me anything about canning unless I asked a question. Same thing, I never taught my girls because it wasn't anything they were interested in. If they're ever interested, they can ask me questions. Okay, but you need to have a barrier. See this? Now this is my mom's old thing, but it's got this basket. It's very rusty. This is very old. But that, or like my pressure canner has it's almost like a thin metal plate. So you need a barrier between the heat source, your pot, and the jars. So between your jars and the pot. And particularly, I'm doing, well, either one. Whether you're cooking on electric or gas, you need a barrier in the bottom of your pot. That's it. Okay. So really, I should have had this going earlier. I need to get it pretty hot. Now, I have washed my jars in the dishwasher, so I just left them in the dishwasher. It just finished, the light's still on, so maybe 10 or 15 minutes ago, so they should still be hot enough. Otherwise, sometimes I set my oven on the lowest setting and put them in there. I have done room temperature jars, but it's winter. In the summer, I wouldn't mind to do room temperature jars. But like I said, it's winter, so the jars are probably kind of cold. This year we're keeping it a little bit warmer, but typically 67 to 70 is what the temperature is in here, and you're putting boiling liquid in, so you want your jars to be hotter. So let me bring you in here and show you what this looks like. Okay, so I hope you can see that. So I'm starting to feel resistance as I stir. It's harder to stir. You can see we started out up here. And we've gone down this much, so it's almost by half. And then you're getting this thickness on your spoon when you pull it up. And that chunks of stuff, that's my herbs that you'll remember we put in. Now, I tasted it, and I did have to add definitely more salt. I also had some garlic scape salt that I had made myself. I added that, so it gave it a little more garlic flavor. But I definitely had to add oregano, salt, and basil. Those three I had to add a lot more of. So let me grab my jars and we'll get going here. Okay, a few more tips and tricks I've learned along the way. Obviously you want your jars to be warm. We already talked about that. But when they're coming out of the oven, and these actually should be warmer, when they come out of the oven, I turn them upside down so the heat kind of stays in there. My water is not hot, but it's actually getting hot. Doesn't have to be boiling when you put it in there. You just don't want your jar to crack. So you want it to be warm enough that you're putting this hot liquid in and your jar doesn't crack. I have a good funnel. I don't know how good it is, but it's a funnel. A lot of people ladle. I personally like to turn this off so I'm not splattering everywhere. And I just like to use a scoop. So we're going until we're within a 1/4 inch of the top of this jar. Now, I mentioned that I was going to do quarts and pints. A quart is 4 cups. A pint is 2 cups. If you were raised in the 80s like me and nobody ever taught you that, I have to figure this out for myself all the time. Why that's important is they do have different water bath. Water bath just means you're boiling it. You can buy a little measuring thing for canning. I do not have one. I just tend to eyeball it, which is probably not good. But don't do as I do as I say. Don't do whatever. You know what that is. Okay. I need to save room for 2 teaspoons of lemon juice in the top. What I said about we don't want to put the lemon juice at the bottom. Now my other tip, you might hear my teapot starting to get hot in the background because I've learned that you never know how much water, once you get your jars in there, I don't know if I'm gonna have enough. Now that's a tablespoon, so I'm doing like 2/3 of a tablespoon. And you don't know if you're gonna have enough water in your water bath. I try to remember to get a pot of, just a teapot of boiling water so then I can pour it in my water bath if I don't have enough water. There's times I have to take water out of my water bath because it's too full. But that's only when I have it filled with jars, which I'm not going to have. It looks like I'm going to be able to do a 4th one. I really didn't think I would. Why I mentioned doing pints is because when we make pizza, we don't need a whole quart of this. And if my daughter just wants to make some pasta for herself, she doesn't need a whole quart of pasta sauce. And there have been times I've had to throw it out because it's gotten moldy, because it's gotten pushed to the back. We've forgotten about it. So I would rather have to open a small jar and then maybe open a second small jar than to waste part of a big jar. It's a lot of work to have to throw it out. Now, something I learned from the Canning Diva, yes, there is a Canning Diva, was to wipe off your jars with vinegar on a cloth. Now, my mom never did that because she never did anything oily or greasy. And I never did. I just always wiped it off with water until I started canning meat. And then you have to use vinegar or very hot water. I've seen people on canning group boards on Facebook say, well, you're having lid failure because you're using vinegar. So I have brand new lids here. I know I'm probably doing this wrong, but one thing I love about new lids is you don't have to put them in hot water anymore. Now I actually have some generic lids I got from an Amish store that I do still get those hot in water. I'm not advocating any certain brand. I buy whatever is cheapest. I'll just show you real quick. I pretty much always have a stash of old lids, rings. I just got this pile of rings here. I've got rings in here. And I just have drawers. I don't know, a drawer and a half full of rings. Because they come every time you buy your jars. Now, if you're brand new to canning, you may not know that your jars are reusable. As long as, like I showed you, I went around the lid to make sure there was no dings. As long as there's no cracks in it. Now, if people are going to get on me for reusing lids, I will tell you, I use them for my herbs. I use them for things I've dehydrated. Yes, that is hot. Okay, now I need to go get my little tong thingies. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm sure these have a formal name, like jar lifter or something like that, but when I first started, I started doing applesauce. Just on my own, wanted to figure out, had a lot of apples. We were actually in an apartment at the time. I ended up buying a food mill in order to make the applesauce. Yeah, I'm gonna have too much water in here. I'm gonna have to take some water out. I don't have them all in there yet. But anyway, the food mill was terrible. Ended up borrowing a friend's thing like I had that I showed you, and just figured out how to do this. Wasted a lot of jars. This was pre-Pinterest days. Okay, so to take water out, I just very carefully, because it does need to be, I can't remember if it's like an inch or 2 inches or something like that above, and I don't want to get burnt. I'll have to go back and watch the beginning of this because it's been a couple of days since I started cooking these down. I had to put it in the fridge, put it in the fridge. I told you TikTok shop was getting crazy. And actually, it's been less than 24 hours and it's already back on. Yes, I'm going to have to take some more water out or I will be boiling over. So I'm going to show you, the timer went off and then I turned it off and I let it set for 5 minutes just to be not quite so hot. But I had leakage, evidently. I don't know if it came out the top and I'm going to have one that didn't seal, or if I had a jar break. If a jar broke, it's because I had the heat on high and I shouldn't have. That was my bad. So I'm going to get these out and we'll find out what was going on. Okay, so the very first one I pulled out, it started making a sucking noise, so it evidently broke in the bottom. It's one of my purple jars. The second one to do that recently. So I think I need to start pouring hot water into them to test them before I do any canning with them. Anyway, so I'll show you these. I will have to wash these off when they're done. And you will know if they've sealed because the little bubble that is in the middle of the, let's see if I can find one here. If it hasn't sealed, you can do this. If it's sealed, you'll press and it won't make that noise. Now I should, over the next few minutes as these start cooling off, if they haven't already sealed, which that one I think already has. Some of these, well, that one's not. Okay, so some of these haven't already sealed and you should hear a little ping. That is music to a canner's ears. So that's it. That's it. I just leave these here for 24 hours. I will have to wash them off because of the mess. I'm going to have to let that completely cool before I can dump that out and get the glass out of there and everything. And then once you've washed them off, you take the rings off and you store them on a shelf in a cool, dry, preferably darker place than normal. A lot of people do it in their basement, but if you have a cool closet somewhere, that's fine as well. Thanks for joining me. I hope you will like, subscribe, comment, share. Come back and see me again soon. Bye-bye. Just a final follow-up. I ended up with 3 quarts and 3 pints of pasta sauce out of all of those tomatoes because I did lose 1 quart And I don't know how that happened. It must have just been a weakened jar, because normally when my jars break, they kind of break evenly down here around the bottom. This was literally like a triangle out of the side. So I've never had that happen before. I don't know why it happened. But that's it. Comment down below if you have any favorite tasty home preserved tomato treats. And we'll be enjoying this in these winter months. See you again real soon.